me, I mean, it was kind of a last minute decision, but I knew generally that I did not want to go to grad school right away, maybe in the future, but I also wanted to do something meaningful with my time after graduation while still being able to have those international experiences, which for me when I studied abroad was really meaningful. That was the first time I had really been out of the country, done anything like that. So I chose Malaysia because I wanted to go somewhere that I had never been before and probably wouldn't be able to get back to again easily, or I don't know why I would really go back to Malaysia for any reason. And so I knew I wanted to go somewhere Southeast Asia, so I chose Malaysia. And part of the reason I chose that was kind of pragmatic because there were 100 spots open in that program, and so not all of them have that many. Some countries have one spot. I think Indonesia maybe had 30, and then right next door Malaysia had 100. Okay, so, and you can only apply to one country. So part of it was that I know I want to go somewhere in this area. I don't have a huge draw towards one specific country, so I kind of wanted to have a good chances of getting in. And then I also looked at statistics of people who applied, and I think the years previous, maybe only 250 or 300 people applied. So your chances of getting in are pretty good, especially if you have a good application. So that's part of the reason I applied there. And also, again, just to have those experiences that wouldn't be really easy to have otherwise.
The process for me was learning to really look at the world in a different perspective and actually go out and look at the world. And for me, I chose transport partly by accident, partly by fate, because my father's a transport planner, and started poking around and picked up a book by a guy named Dave Bannister who was at Oxford. And I said, okay, well, there's something called transport studies. We don't have transport studies in the United States. That is not a major that you do in college. When I started to dig deeper into it in England, you really saw that there was a real field of study to understand what it means to implement transport policy. What is transport? What is it not just from the boat, train, and truck perspective, but how does transport affect people? And because of my work in sustainability while on campus, there was a new program that was coming out called Sustainability in Transport. And it really blended my backgrounds in chemistry and political science and allowed me to channel that. And so I applied, and I emailed a guy named David Minn, and I said, I'm an American who's interested in transport. I'm applying for a Fulbright. Would I fit? And I said my background and my research, and he said, yeah, this is the type of student. We're looking for someone who can be interdisciplinary, to use a background in liberal arts. Now that England doesn't have liberal arts, per se, but he said, well, you're able to think like a scientist and understand the policy implications. This is the type of person we want. It really changed my outlook, because for someone who never studied abroad to be able to use the Fulbright, to have those experiences really has changed my life.
I first learned about the Fulbright from a presentation that Maureen had done the spring of my junior year, actually the fall of my junior year, because then that spring I went abroad to Spain. And like for anyone who has studied abroad, you know that experience is very transformative, and most likely makes you want to go abroad again. So she had told me about it that fall before I went abroad. I came back that summer and emailed her right away, and I was like, I want to apply. I want to do this. I want to go back abroad. I want to have this experience again, but for longer. And started, really digging into Fulbright and what my options were. There are the English teaching assistant grants, which is what I decided to do. So because I had wanted to teach English, or teach, not English necessarily, And I had some experience here in doing some ESL teaching locally. It was a good fit for me. Additionally, I at the time had thought that I would want to go into academia and teach at the university level, and Portugal was the only country within my language options to teach at that level. Because I had some experience, because the language fit, and because it was what I was interested at the time in doing, it made a lot of sense for me. And I think because I had that background, it helped me get the grant. I will say though that Portuguese is not Spanish, and I learned that very quickly. So that is one thing to keep in mind if certain countries call for a specific language background. If they suggest you need to have, beginning or intermediate of certain language, you definitely want to get there before you go. Portugal did not call for anything except Portuguese or Spanish, and so it did help me a lot in the beginning. The just basic levels, I got there and I could pretty much read, but conversational was totally different. Phonetics is completely different, but it didn't take too long, and I mentioned this when we were just casually talking before the presentation. I ended up staying, actually, so I did the ETA for a year, and then the university offered me a position to stay for another year, and then another year. And I ended up staying for about 4.5 years. I also got my master's degree while I was there, so even if you're just thinking about Fulbright for in between what I'm doing, I don't know what to do next, it can turn into something a lot bigger.
What interested me was that I was a German major for all 4 years, and I felt like before entering, a career path, I wanted to really, I wanted to strengthen my German skills, but I also wanted to, and that was a way of proving to myself that I hadn't just studied for 4 years for nothing, and that I could actually use them with native speakers, and because I had planned to go back and teach high school German and in Bucks County where I'm from, and I thought that was great. And I also, I had wanted to become a teacher, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to invest in a master's degree, in education, if I hated teaching. So this was a great sampling to be able to go out and teach and to see what that was like, and to then become, a teacher. And I did go on. Actually, while I was still in Germany, I had to take my GREs, and so I took the train all the way to Berlin, and I took my GREs, and then I had applied for things. But it's funny the ripple effect that the Fulbright had, has even had still, that because I had the Fulbright and I was applying to graduate schools, the graduate schools know the Fulbright and its value. And so one of the things, I had applied to Middlebury, and anyone who studies language knows that Middlebury is top of its league. And here it is, I had this German phone number on my application, and I had applied to Tufts University, and Tufts had offered me a teaching assistantship, so I would basically go free of cost to Tufts, which is great. They have a program that's, you do 2 years, and you do your student teaching there, and so I studied education and German at Tufts, and through this 2-year program, and it was free for me. I mean, and they, so it was a great opportunity. But that was because I had the Fulbright, and that's why it was offered to me, I think. I really do believe that had I not had the Fulbright, they only had a couple slots for these teaching assistantships. And I think that was kind of a star on my lapel, that they were, looking at that and saying, well, great, this woman is dedicated. She spent a year there. She knows the language. She's really interested. Whereas Middlebury called me, and I think his name was Johannes, and he's like, oh, I listened because you had to send in a tape with your voice, and it's kind of intrusive. And he says, yes, I'll take you. He says, you're not the best, but you'll do. And I said, oh yeah, well, Tufts is offering me a full ride, and I will also be, I said, I'll be certified to teach in the state of Massachusetts. Are you going to do that? And I said, because they're like, and then they called back and they're like, are you interested in coming? And I said, only if you can offer me a full ride and a teaching licensure. And they said, okay, no, we can't do that, but we are Middlebury still. Like, Middlebury's great. I don't mean to talk down. It's a great school, but I do believe that Fulbright was one of the reasons, that happened for me, that I was able to do that. But I really think too, I'm sort of further along than the rest of the group. It's funny because everyone who, you turn an application into, you're turning an application, your resume, and they're looking at that, they're like, wow, Fulbright, people recognize it. And it's more of an opportunity than you'll even guess later in life. Like you may, down the line, you want to talk about, connections and sort of networking and things like that. It's a wonderful opportunity for that, and that's pretty much it.
Email from you, and I was kind of sad that I had to study abroad as a physics major. Our schedule's really tight. Even though it's, we had the liberal arts opportunities, I took really fun courses. We couldn't justify sending us away and missing, heaven forbid, atomic and nuclear physics with Fialkoff, right? Can't miss that class. So my roommate knew you, Ashley Roman, I think. Yep. And so she was like, oh, that would be so fun, do it. So I met with you, and
she didn't.
Yeah, it was so weird. But I did not know anything about international. I didn't even know where Cameroon was, by the way, on the map. You couldn't have told me to point to it. But we looked through the Fulbright book together, and I think you encouraged me to push past my limits. I was maybe willing to go as far as France with my rudimentary French skills. But there are other French-speaking countries that are really cool, and Cameroon, in the book, it said they were interested in science and technology as part of their research emphasis. And so if you look through the different countries, they have kind of a research goal if you're doing the Fulbright research, and so you sort of want your research to line up with that, and that's why I ended up picking Cameroon. It was French-speaking, and they were looking for research in science, and I had the physics background and no clue where Cameroon was on the map, and I thought that sounds great, why not? And I remember I was still interested in graduate school, so I did the Fulbright application, and here's the catch. The Fulbright application is a little bit tougher than any of your grad school applications will ever be. So you do that over the summer, and then while everyone's struggling with their grad school applications, you're like, just make copies. So then you're ready to go for any other applications, and I ended up deferring graduate school for a year. I got the Fulbright acceptance when I was on a tour of one of the places I accepted for graduate school. I got it the day before I left, so when I decided to tell them about it, and they were really excited and made it all work. Yes, it does have, a lot of people know what it is, so they're willing to make adjustments. And then it changed the whole direction of everything.
I decided to apply for the Fulbright for a couple reasons, and they've been mentioned before, but one was I really had no clue what I wanted to do. I had some vague idea that in the future I'd want to go to grad school, but I wasn't quite prepared to jump into that yet. So I wanted to do something productive without just taking a random office job, and while I'm trying to figure it out. So that was part of it. The other part was I studied abroad in Germany. I was a German and philosophy double major, and I really wanted to expand upon my study abroad experience. I felt like, I had an awesome time, but it was very much international, student-oriented, still was around a lot of Americans. I don't know that I really fully integrated in German society, so I wanted to go back again and have that more integrative experience, working there, being around Germans every single day, not just going to school. So those were my two main reasons. I didn't really ever want to teach. I had done ESL tutoring while I was at school here, and also when I had studied abroad, I worked in a first grade classroom. I really enjoyed that. So I had enjoyed teaching experiences, but there was no part of me that was like, I want to teach someday. So don't feel like that's a deterrence for you. It definitely doesn't have to, relate to your future career. It's a meaningful experience no matter what. So I was placed in a very small rural village about 30 minutes north of Hamburg, which is a city roughly the size of Boston. So I commuted basically every single day with the teachers who worked at the school from Hamburg, because they all lived in the city as well, young professionals, kind of a similar outlook. So I got to know both the students in this little, rural community, and then also the teachers who were my age or a little bit older, and the life that they were living in the city. And in terms, I'd say I worked maybe about 30 hours a week, which is pretty awesome. So it left a lot of time for travel. And I got to kind of make my own schedule a little bit. I worked generally, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. In terms of what I did with the students, it varied highly on the teachers that I was working with. So I was at a school where there were probably 8 English teachers, and I worked with all of them in different capacities. Some I was taking students out and doing one-on-one time. Some I was inserting, American cultural things into their lessons. Others I was side by side. And it was a really unique experience in that sense because I did a lot of different things. So if you are interested in teaching, I think there's a lot of different opportunities. Yeah, the German program, there were actually a lot of ETAs there, which was one of the reasons I had picked Germany. I thought it would be a nice safety net, also better chances of getting in. So I also got to know some Americans who lived in Hamburg as well, and so that was a nice, fallback crowd, and also I could travel with them.
When I first got there, I think the first thing I noticed was how much I stood out. At Gettysburg, I kind of blended in the group, but in Cameroon, I think I would walk outside the door of my hotel. I stayed at a hotel the first couple of days while I was looking for an apartment, and I would walk out the door and everyone would scream, "Ma blanche," which means my white girl in French. And so it's sort of like a welcome to a new culture, kind of shocking, and they meant it in a nice way. There would be little kids, running up to me screaming it too. So it wasn't like a derogatory thing. It was just like they were excited to see someone that they hadn't seen before. They thought I looked like Hannah Montana. I guess that was a big show back then. So they also called me Hannah Montana. I take that as a compliment, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so that was like my first response was just, oh no, I can't hide anymore. Everyone knows I'm here. Partly it's because where I was living, it was great. It was sort of a growing suburb of the capital city of Cameroon. And the capital city, it's like New York City. It's a really good, fun place and exciting. But where I was living was sort of where it merged with this little tiny village. And so everyone knew everyone else. No one had seen anyone who looked like I did. And they all were really excited to meet me. So I had a good opportunity to speak lots of French just because everyone wanted to speak to me, and also English too. The students were really excited. I didn't teach there, but my research was done in local schools. So I kind of got to see a really cool part of the education system. I would go into the classrooms and do what we call ethnographic research. And so trying to immerse yourself into the culture and be part of the community, and then learn sort of from the inside out. And so I got to sit in the back of the classrooms with the students, watching the teachers teach them physics and things like that. And that was part of my research. So my research was really trying to understand access to science education for girls. So I had to get to know the students, get to know the teachers, interview local school leaders and policymakers and try and understand the structure, but also the inside view. And so it was kind of fun because as a Fulbright researcher, you have two main jobs. You're kind of doing your research, but also acting as a cultural ambassador. And I think my research topic also really allowed me to merge those and try and understand the community. After a while, I did a simulate, and they called me Anne and screamed that out on the street, so that was better. Well, that's fine.
My experience was a little bit different. As you said before, I was given my own set of classes. I was supposed to be an assistant, but I kind of felt honored because everybody treated me as if I were this English expert. I am, not that I'm an English expert, I'm a native speaker. And so they had, originally just, here you go, here are the classes, because there was one person who, one of the teachers, he had regularly been calling out, and the year before, and then they just, I don't know why he still had a job, but throughout the whole year, I went the whole year without ever seeing this teacher. They would write the names on the board of the person. So I had the opportunity to have my own classrooms, which was great. It was 5th grade through 10th grade, and it was in a rural community, and I guess the biggest thing that stood out was the economic status of of the students that I was teaching. They were not college bound. They were those who were going to go on to vocational schools. So English, they had to pass to a point, and it was just an interesting. The conversations with the teachers that went on in the teachers' lounge were very interesting. I think, especially now, I'm a social worker now, and I think, looking back on that, I think that also very much interested me. The education was affected by home life, and those were the conversations that were happening in the teacher's lounge. Like, for example, they had a trip to Hamburg, a nice trip, and one of the parents had handed in food stamps as, equivalent to the cost to go to Hamburg and like the cost of the ticket to, the theater. And one of the teachers was complaining about that, and then another teacher had argued they're giving bread out of their mouth so that this kid has an opportunity to experience something. And you just get goosebumps thinking about that. Oh my God, this is so important to the parent that they're doing this. So one of the teachers just took the food stamps and put the money in because, they wanted, she said, I'll just go to the store and I'll use this. And here's the cash, and it was, so that kind of thing really affected me, and knowing that some of my students, I might be the only English speaker, native English speaker, and their experience of this other world. And it was really kind of cool. I remember one of my students introduced me to her mother, and she says, "This is my English teacher, she's from England." I'm like, I was like, we did all those sessions on Philadelphia, where I'm from, like, what happened? But I was like, at least she knows I'm an English speaker. Like, there we go. She got that part right. But it just, the whole, that there is a world outside of the rural community. It was sort of impoverished. They had it was lower middle class, and so farming community and family issues like alcoholism and all sorts of things had popped up. So it was a really great opportunity to kind of realize what issues, even back here, might influence the students we teach.
So my experience teaching in Portugal was different but similar. Similar in that I also taught my own classes, different in that that was what they expected. They never thought that I was going to be an assistant. Different other situations, but when I applied, it was English teaching assistant. I assumed that meant assistant, and when I got there, I had been emailing the director trying to prepare and see what materials I should bring, how am I going to be helping out, trying to get details, and she was always just, oh, we'll deal with that when you get here. And I got there. The first day I met with her, and essentially she told me, well, we don't have any English classes. So I was at a university. So I was in the School of Psychology and Education Science. And it's a huge university. I was in the second biggest city in Portugal, which in comparison is not a huge city, but still a city. And it was one of the biggest public universities there. So every school is quite large in itself. So there were a decent amount of students in the School of Education, or Psychology and Education Science. And I get there and I meet with the director, and she said, we don't have any English classes for our students here. So you're just going to teach them. And you're going to teach primarily our doctoral students and our faculty. And me, who I don't have a background in education, I had done, like I said, I did some ESL things, but that was very much as an assistant capacity and knew nothing about, curriculum and setting up courses and exams, and I really didn't have a background for it. But there I was, and this is what I was doing. So a lot of research on my own just about how to even do this. And essentially got the list of all of the students who potentially would have been interested that I guess she had asked before, reached out to them, set up a bunch of different classes, had to evaluate their levels and then separate them from beginner. They really could barely hold a conversation to advanced. We could talk and have a great conversation. But what they wanted was practice on how to go to conferences and talk about their research and more advanced things. So I had to separate them by level and then figure out how to teach them. So it was definitely a huge learning process. I had a lot of conversations with people there about it, conversations with people here, a lot of my own research on just how to even do all of this. But it was really rewarding. It was a huge learning experience. And I said in the beginning that I thought that I had wanted to be a teacher. And that was one of the things, I think it turned me away, not because I didn't enjoy it, but it just made me realize what was really involved. And I ended up finding other interests. But in the end, I think that was almost one of the most important things that I learned. As someone else said before, you weren't sure whether I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be a teacher. I thought I was. And then once I really had that experience, I walked away knowing I think I want to go another way with this. But as far as the day-to-day, I was in a new city where I didn't speak the language, but like I said, it was second biggest city. Most people, young people especially, spoke English. All of their TV, movies, music, it's pretty much all American. They don't dub it, they have subtitles at the bottom, which was great for me, except that when I did want to practice my Portuguese, it was, again, like everyone wanted to speak English with me. But eventually, after I started my master's and had to take classes in Portuguese, I really learned it and really got immersed in it. So yeah, huge learning experience, but it was really great to see higher ed, because I work in higher ed now in Philadelphia, and it was really interesting to see the differences in how things are structured and how it all works together, and the way that students have certain professional relationships with their teachers, and just the way it all works is different, but it was a great learning experience for me, and then kind of set my track for what I wanted to do